Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Agenda Setting Work Session for Tuesday, February 6, 2024. It is 9:05 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. To my left is Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier. And we have Commissioners Mejia, Edwards, and Klaus on Zoom. We have Interim County Manager Robin Campbell and Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder here, and we have virtual public attendance available on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We're in session till noon today. We'll have a midpoint break and then resume on the same Zoom. So we wanted to kick off today's meeting with our PIO Director, Megan Porter, who has a couple of new staffers she wanted to introduce, and I wanted them to have that opportunity and then let them get back to what they're doing instead of sit here all morning. Megan, back over to you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor, and I wanted to introduce Stephanie Malham. She is our new internal communications person, and we have Devin Felix here. He is our new video production person. So we want to welcome them, and you'll start seeing their faces and names.
And I'll be watching you from the back room at all times.
So which one is which?
Stephanie is internal comms, and Devin is our video production.
Welcome aboard, guys. Yeah.
Good to meet you.
Very happy to have you and need your services very, very much. And then, yeah, come back in, later in the morning. I think the other commissioners will be here and just say hi, but appreciate having you aboard.
Good, thanks.
All right, great. Item 1 is housing strategies, which we do monthly, and Keely Marino is here to provide that update.
Yes, good afternoon. Oh, good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino, Public Health and Social Services. I have an update for you today. First, I'd like to start off with a point-in-time annual homeless census that took place on the last week of January. It's an annual accounting of how many individuals in our community are experiencing unsheltered homelessness and sheltered homelessness. Our staff member, Ariel Benson, has been coordinating that effort for the last 4 years and just did a dynamite job this year. It's a very heavy lift on an annual basis, and Ariel takes the brunt of that responsibility upon herself. And I just wanted to take a moment to really appreciate her hard work. Through the PIT, we had a number of wonderful Thurston County staff members volunteering that day. We also had our COVID staff or with disease control prevention staff come out to a senior event and do vaccinations for both flu and COVID-19 at a senior event that was held at the Timberland Regional Library. The Timberland Regional Library, for the first time since I've been in my position, let us utilize their space for nearly the entire day. They did this just out of the kindness and goodness of their hearts, and I just wanted to shout out the library. They're so important to our community, the public service that they provide, and that they went the extra mile to make sure that we were able to have a very successful event for seniors experiencing homelessness on Friday, the 27th of January. Also, we had foot care there. We had nurses from St. Martin's University, nursing students, come to the library to provide foot and wound care for individuals experiencing homelessness. And that was a first time in many, many years we were able to provide that extra service. There were 2 very successful large Homeless Connect events or outreach events, one on Friday and one on Wednesday of last week. Northwest Resources, Sam Gilbertson is a person who puts these huge events together and did an excellent job. There's a wonderful turnout. And then also Interfaith Works for letting us utilize Sergio's place for our large Homeless Connect event on Friday, 2 Fridays ago, where we had folks providing haircuts through Olympia Barber School, and then also council member for City of Olympia, Lisa Partially, came and provided veterinarian services and pet care services at the event as well. We are in the process of looking through the surveys and deduplicating and verifying data for entry, and we anticipate having a preliminary data report mid-March. So our team is working diligently to get as much data as possible, as quick as possible into HMIS, or the Homeless Management Information System. And so we look forward to giving you that preliminary report in mid-March. Any questions about the point in time count?
I have one. Not seeing their hands. Do our neighboring counties also do a point in time count? And I ask that because you said the library, and the library cuts across all the different counties. So was the library helping in Lewis County or Grays Harbor, or do they not do a point in time count?
Every county is required to do an annual account during the point in time count, especially those who are balance of state continuum of care counties. So those counties that are their own continuum of care can do one every other year. But yes, every county was conducting a PIT on the same day and throughout the same week. As far as the library, I'm not sure. That was something that we arranged ourselves while planning for this event.
Okay, Commissioner Mejia.
Thank you, Keely. I just really want to thank public health staff for, Keely, Ariel, and just getting out there with all of this and just making it seem like such a smooth operation. I know that a lot of work goes into it, so just very thankful for the work that you all do. My question is in terms of where locations are chosen, right? I saw events in Yelm, Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater. And then I was just thinking, do we get something in the South County areas? How does that work? Is there outreach in those areas to get an accurate count?
Yeah, so over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've relied almost entirely on ROOF, or Rochester Organization of Families. Their executive director, Kelly McNelly, usually participates in the point in time count by collecting surveys throughout that week as well for those in South County. However, it's trickier in South County. A lot of folks, outside of ROOF, there's not a centralized place necessarily that we're aware of where people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness might gather. And then what has been reported to me from Kelly McNally down in Rochester is that oftentimes people may be technically experiencing homelessness, but they don't identify themselves as being homeless. Also, what's tricky is, according to the HUD definition of who is considered homeless, those who are doubled up or couch surfing aren't counted. So a number of families down in South County are doubled up, are couch surfing, and would not be able to be counted under HUD's definition of homeless, even though technically they are. I'm so open to ideas about where we might be able to go in the upcoming point in time county events. So,
thank you for that. I'm looking at Commissioner Fournier, maybe the Tenino Food Bank in the future.
Yeah, I know we've done it. We participate, or they have participated in the past. There's been things at the Quarry House and things like that. So I mean, it's happened. And Yelm, it is hard to do there, right? Because it's it's a lot of area, and everything's kind of spread out. But like, what about Yelm? What did things look like in Yelm?
So in Yelm, over the last 8 or so years, there's a group called Love Abounds here, and they've kind of been leading that charge. So in the last couple of years, they've had a community event or a community meal and done surveys with folks who attend that. What we've heard from Yelm is that they have seen a significant reduction in unsheltered homelessness, visible homelessness, with regards to people living in tents, et cetera, that the majority of people that they're engaging with that are experiencing homelessness in Yelm are living in vehicles. So those people living in vehicles are really hard to count for PIT because we don't go knocking on car windows or doors, disrupting people for that event. It's a voluntary event. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was down in Rochester for their event a few years back, and I mean, I think the whole day or the whole window we had, and there was maybe a half dozen folks that came through. It wasn't a lot. And they had, you know, socks and different supplies and some food, but it was a small number that actually came through the door there. I don't know if that's changed, but anyway. All right, let's go to our next topic, Keely.
All right, great. So the right-of-way initiative. So over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of conversation about how the right-of-way initiative has morphed into the encampment resolution program. What does that mean? What does that look like? How does that relate to camps that are not identified under the right-of-way initiative initially? So all of the camps that were initially identified were taken care of and addressed in 2023. And so there's been a lot of back and forth around different properties that may be addressed under the right-of-way initiative. Currently, the Desmond Drive has been in the spotlight and that process. So there's been some confusion around how many people actually live on that property, how many people are on the original by name list that Lacey's Mott mobile outreach team and crew have been accounting for the last 2 years due to having an MOU with Department of Enterprise Services to monitor that site. However, outreach identified that there were more than the 8 people that were on the by name list. So there's been a lot of back and forth around that situation. And we did get to a point where Commerce had agreed that if DES would allow for the by name list to be open to account for everyone that was living on the DES site, they could be offered housing through the right-of-way program. And so the Regional Housing Council did draft a letter and send that to Commerce or to DES. We have not, as far as I understand, heard back from DES, but what I do know is that Department of Enterprise Services, DES, has moved forward in bringing in heavy equipment and taking care of some of the underbrush and some of the greenery around that site to make it more difficult for people to live back there and not be noticed. So they've been working on that all last week. And that I've heard reported that that the folks that have been living out there have mostly dispersed. There's very few people that are still out there. They're working on getting folks that are on the original by name list at this point into Maple Courts, the hotel in Lacey that has been converted to emergency shelter. And that is in the works. During a meeting this morning, that was discussed and is going to be facilitated hopefully this week.
I have a foundational question on that because you're talking about Desmond under right-of-way, but I was told by somebody last night that Commerce is denying that they ever meant to include Desmond Camp as part of right-of-way initiative. Is that true?
What I can say is that the parameters and the guidance around right-of-way and response to right-of-way has been very inconsistent. And so I'd say at the very beginning of this process, it was the 5 sites were Pacific Avenue, Lily Road, City Center, Slater County, and Wheeler. Those were the 5 camps initially identified in 2022 under the right-of-way initiative. As time moved on, City of Olympia advocated to have Nickerson Camp included. That's their property. And the argument was, well, if we clear Wheeler, Nickerson is just right across the street. So why not just also move Nickerson into some housing? And so subsequently, City of Lacey was like, we also have this camp that's on DES property, state property. Is this also a camp that can be under the right-of-way or encampment resolution program initiative? And it was determined, yes, it could be. In the encampment resolution program, there's guidance that I think upwards of 20% of the funds and activities identified under the right-of-way and ERP programs can be used for other public properties. So I believe that this site in particular falls into that 20% category.
So Commerce is not being accurate when the position that they're taking now is not accurate position.
Not having heard that conversation, Commissioner, I'm not quite sure the context, but it has
Keely,
been.
it was my report out to the commission, and I reported what Nathan relayed last week after it was asked if this was part of the right-of-way, and he said it was not.
Yes, correct. Yes, that was a message that was given last week during a meeting, which was quite confusing. So, because it was identified in January as, yes, we're moving forward and utilizing right-of-way funds and the right-of-way initiative. But then last Tuesday, it was declared this isn't a right-of-way camp. So we're doing it differently. But the week prior, they had said we're doing it exactly how we've done every other camp. So it's been very confusing.
That's what I'm trying to make some sense out of. Commissioner Edwards has his hand up.
You made mention a couple times of a binding list or finding,
By name.
by name list, what,
By name.
and what's that all about?
So for every right-of-way encampment, there's been a process where outreach and jurisdictional staff have gone out and actually engaged with individuals living in the encampment and made an actual list of who is living on that site. So names of all the people living on the site, and that is what is we're referring to as a by name list.
And what do you utilize that for?
To ensure that the people on the that who's being offered housing were on the by name list. So it's not just I have a by name list, we close the by name list, then Jane Doe can't come onto that site and say, wait, I live here too, can I get into housing? So it's to ensure that the people who are living in the right-of-way camps are prioritized and offered housing according to the right-of-way initiative.
Yeah, the process is to lock in the group, create the name list, trespass anyone who comes after that point, and then find housing for the people that are on that list, and then harden the camp, and that's what they've.
I guess from a law enforcement perspective, if they were to do a trespass citation or something, how do they know, is this an honor system? I mean, my name's Joe Blow, or is there some way that you know it is Joe Blow?
I'm sure some people have IDs, but the initial engagement in getting the by name list together is kind of, sometimes it's a slow build in terms of people feeling comfortable talking to outreach workers. I know for the Desmond site, they've had their mobile outreach team and CRU out there. So law enforcement and the MOTT have gone out and worked for a couple years getting to know folks out there. So they have their own list. So I don't have any concerns that if people are on the by name list, then they get offered housing.
I guess I'd just say that I doubt that would stand up in court if somebody was to say they did or they didn't, having received a citation, where fingerprints make it pretty positive. So I'll just throw that out there and forget any more about it. Thank you.
Commissioner Fournier.
How many people in this site are on that binding list? How many are left? And have they been offered housing?
So there were on the original by name list were 8 names. However, there were at least double that living on the site that Lacey was unaware of and Department of Enterprise Services were unaware of. So of the 8 original names, I believe 4 or 5 people have been offered housing. They're trying to track down the remaining 4 while we determine with DES if the other names can be added to the by name list.
Are there beds available for these individuals and they're just refusing to accept the help?
No, there are beds available over at Maple Court. It's not necessarily a matter of refusing. It could be that they just haven't been there at the same time, so they just haven't made contact with them since housing has become available. Also, there's some really specific issues by each individual. So there's an individual that I understand who's on the original by name list who is legally blind and has a romantic partner who wasn't a part of the original 8. And so that person was told, you can move into housing, but your partner, who's also your caregiver, cannot because they're not on the by name list. And so that person, for their own safety and well-being, did not move into Maple Court because they don't want to be separated from their partner. So, I mean, the circumstances are very individualized.
So part of what's complicated about this particular site is the list of names was created 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And originally it was about 28. And people have either been moving away or they've been offered housing. So the list got whittled down to like the last 8. Maple Court said we can have room for the 8 on this date. And so the 8 have been offered or are about to be offered a place to live in Maple Court. They can take it or not, but after a certain date, they even either have to take it or leave. And now we have all these other people. As of the time the list was created 2 years ago, there should not have been any additional people on that site. And yet here they are. So that's a big part of the complication.
Okay, next item.
And then we also, the Regional Housing Council also drafted a letter to the Department of Commerce requesting that since the original 5 camps that were identified to be part of the right-of-way have been cleared, if we can start moving towards more local control over the this process around who gets placed into housing. What happens is with beds that are only for right-of-way, there have been times where there have been beds that have been sitting empty for weeks, sometimes a month, waiting for the next camp to go. And so with all of the original camps having been addressed, the request to Commerce has been, can we now release it back to local processes, still prioritize people from rights of way into beds, but start utilizing our coordinated entry. And that was a process that was identified in an interlocal agreement between Lacey, Thurston County, and Department of Commerce, specifically toward Maple Court. So this morning we continued that conversation with Ted Kelleher, who is the director of the Housing Assist. Well, no, he's no longer the director of Housing Assistance Unit. He's the director of the Policy Unit, and so has been overseeing the right-of-way initiative from day one. And he led our meeting this morning, and it was determined that City of Olympia staff and Thurston County staff will be drafting a proposal of what that might look like for us to have a little bit more control over of the beds and how people are prioritized into beds, while staying within the statute and the right-of-way initiative. And that's my report.
Keely, could you provide the board with a sort of an outline of the process related to Maple Court and the monitoring?
Sure. The operations of Maple Court are that's a contract through our office with the Low Income Housing Institute. And so the contract for operations is based on Consolidated Homeless Grant guidelines. So the Consolidated Homeless Grant, or the CHG funds that we facilitate contracting every year, come with a very specific guidelines that every agency must follow if they receive Consolidated Homeless Grant funds. And so with our contract with Low Income Housing Institute for the operations of Maple Court, we use the exact same contract template as for other CHG grantees, as well as call out the requirements to follow Consolidated Home Grant guidelines, as well as the original language that was written into the RFP for the right-of-way initiative. That includes overseeing the code of conduct, that our staff can look at the code of conduct, make edits to it, other documents that are created for serving individuals in that program. Our office has the contractual right to look them over and have some back and forth and some editing capabilities. So as this is a newer program, we have scheduled a monitoring visit. So we'll be providing on-site monitoring of that program specifically. We're sending the letter out on February 12th. And what that letter does is just lets Lehigh know that we are moving forward with the monitoring. We set a date for our initial conversation, and then my staff will go through program documents. We'll be going on site. We'll be interviewing staff, looking at invoicing, very light touch on fiscal monitoring of that program, and then we'll generate a report. So that is something that we are actively engaged in implementing. Yes.
Can you brief us all on what the code of conduct looks like? We've received some complaints and some there's been some concerns voiced that it's maybe not being followed. And there was a council member from a neighbor, or from one of the jurisdictions, saying that, it was supposed to be a low barrier shelter, not a no barrier shelter, were the words. And I think he also said that the model that they toured was Aspen Court, and what they saw there is what they envisioned for Maple Court, and what he says he now sees is not at all what they were what they signed on for.
Absolutely. So I'm happy to forward you the code of conduct. It spells out very specifically rules about using substances not being allowed in the premises, what the consequences are, behavior generally speaking, et cetera. So, and what might constitute an exit from the program. So I'm happy to provide that for you all to look at. I can't recall all of the elements of it, but happy to do so. So the difference between the Aspen Court and this is that this is right of way. So when the legislation first dropped in 2022, the language was very clear that everyone living in the rights of way must be offered a meaningful, or be given a meaningful offer of housing that is safer than the right of way. And so when you think about the rights of way on the sides of highways being very unsafe, that if individuals are living on those sites and that's the safest place they have to live, then you can anticipate a higher acuity of individuals that may be that are living there. And so with the language of the proposal, or not the proposal, the initiative, as well as the RFP, it was very clear that individuals on the right of way must be offered housing. It's not conditioned. It just says must be offered housing. And so when we were drafting the contract for operations at Lehigh, we had a conversation with the executive director, Sharon Lee, and Department of Commerce around that very fact. Aspen Court is not a right-of-way program or sponsored program. It is a higher barrier program. We negotiated with the executive director of Lehigh a higher amount of funding so that they could provide a larger staff model to create a safer environment or have better line of sight, et cetera. Because we recognize that it takes more staff to do that.
So the theory is it's not very safe on the right of ways, so the housing doesn't have to be that safe because it's at least a little safer than a side of a highway. Is that what you're saying? It doesn't, like there's there's like a safety level that we've got to meet, and if they were living on the right of way, it's very dangerous, so we can tolerate some danger within Maple Court. Is that?
Certainly, less dangerous housing is not part of our contract language. We, of course, want the programs to be safe. I myself used to operate a shelter, and I know how to operate a shelter that is low barrier. It is possible to do if you have the right training and the right staff. That is a very large program that can house up to 118, 125 people at one time, which in individual rooms, which is incredibly difficult to do from a sheltering standpoint.
At Maple Court, you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Correct. So our expectation is that people are treated equitably, that they're following CHG guidelines, that if there's an issue around behavior, that is being addressed appropriately, that they're following the code of conduct, that they have a clear grievance process for tenants that may feel like they're being treated unfairly. So we have expectations of every one of our agencies that have a contract for shelter, that the shelter be a safe place for people to go. So we have other low barrier shelters in our portfolio of shelter operators that have the same exact contract and do not have these issues.
And with this monitoring notice, we're putting them on notice that we want to make sure the expectations are being met.
Yeah, we do monitoring all year. So we try to monitor all of our contracts, especially ones that are either new or we get a risk assessment back that states they might be high risk for whatever reason. then we prioritize those. So yeah, this is just a kind of a routine, but also timely, considering the concerns that have been mentioned.
And yeah, this is totally anecdotal, but you know, the individual that came and spoke to myself and I believe a few other commissioners had said that when they went on a tour there, the staff, it was very laissez-faire, and the staff was like, well, there's nothing we can do about these behaviors that are unacceptable. And it was conveyed that the staff there didn't either understand the behavioral expectations or didn't feel like they were empowered to enforce any behavioral expectations. And I'm hearing from you that's not at all what we have in the contract.
Correct.
Commissioner Edwards and then Commissioner Klaus.
I guess I'm gonna be blunt about it. I'm hearing that at Maple Court, there's open and rampant drug use. And at Aspen Court, there is not. And I just say the drug use because it's obviously criminal activity. I don't know about the assaults or behavior other than that. So why is that tolerated at Maple Court, but not at Aspen Court?
Well, I wouldn't be able to answer that question, Commissioner, as it's not my program, but that's what we aim to find out with the monitoring process.
Well, yeah, but if you've had an ongoing monitoring process in place, what's the deal? How come there hasn't been any rectification of this whole situation? Why hasn't it been rectified?
The monitoring process is just starting. We only have a small number of staff. That monitoring is very labor intensive. It takes a lot of time, so they've been wrapping up the monitoring of a separate program and beginning the monitoring of this program. This program has only been operating since July of 2023. So we are within 8 months of it starting operations. We gave them some time to get off the ground as it was brand new, and now we're following through on our due diligence to monitor.
Commissioner Klaus.
Thank you. Well, first I just want to say thank you to Keely and all of our county staff who have been working on this. I know this has been a really, really complicated process. There's been a lot of confusion around it. And I've also attended a right-of-way meeting where, I've personally seen how hard you're working and how passionate you are about making sure this is happening in an equitable and ethical manner. So I just wanted to throw that out there first. And then I also wanted to say, my understanding, and as we've heard today, is that one of the big differences between Maple Court and Aspen Court is that right-of-way initiative piece. And I personally was on that same tour with Councilmember Greenstein and heard his concerns. I heard the shelter supervisor explain his perspective, and I've also personally worked in shelter situations myself. I'm a former employee of Catholic Community Services working at the mitigation site downtown, and I know how difficult this is. It's not easy. These are hard conversations that we have to have. So the concerns I know are valid. We want everybody to have a safe place to go, but having low barrier shelter options is necessary. So even though it's not a great fit for every single person, and that has come to light through this Desmond encampment situation, I just want to say, as Keely mentioned, there's capacity for 118 to 125 people in one building. That is extremely difficult, and it's been under a year since this program's been operating. So just wanted to mention some of those things. And then I do have a question regarding the Desmond camp. I know there aren't very many people left, but I'm hearing, and Keely, you can help me kind of understand this. I'm hearing that basically the solution we've come up with, that we're working on, is hopefully we can get whoever's left into Maple Court because there are rooms available. But what about those people who have those specific reasons why they can't go? Are we trying to figure out other options, or is their only option Maple Court?
That's a good question. I'd say yes, our community is. I know that Olympian Mutual Aid Partners, who is contracted to provide outreach for the right-of-way initiative. I know that other providers are working to identify strategies to make sure that folks get some kind of offer of housing, it's tricky because the rest of, we've got 2,000, I don't know, upwards of 2,000 people on our coordinated entry master list that have been waiting for however long. And so circumventing that process is something that we like to avoid. However, we want to, if somebody if your neighbor in a camp is being offered housing because of right of way, then in my opinion, you also should be offered the same housing because you're living right next to each other. So we are working on it.
Keely, I would like to ask you about the monitoring process that you're about to start. So what I'm curious about is how will it play out? Like if you determine that what I'm hearing is accurate, that the staff is not enforcing the code of conduct, then what? Like, what do we do? Do we we terminate the contract, kick them out, find a new provider? Do we daily fines? I mean, what's the mechanism to fix that?
So we want to avoid canceling contracts and only in extreme circumstances because the impacts of contract cancellation, sudden contract cancellation, is significant on the people who are being provided services. So we want to avoid that at all costs. We also don't want to be punitive. We want to be supportive of all of our contractors. And so typically in a monitoring, if there are findings around program, we're going to write a report that's going to have corrective actions and then a timeline for those corrective actions to be implemented, and then a follow-up to ensure that they have been. And then ongoing monitoring. And if things have not been cleared up by the deadline, then we move forward with further corrective actions or plans for transition, depending on the severity of the findings. So typically, our homeless crisis response system, our providers are great. They work really hard to be in compliance. Smaller agencies can struggle, and we try to be as supportive as possible because we want the system to stay whole. We don't want to sever ties with providers. We want to have a good relationship with them, which sometimes looks like technical assistance, mentorship, and support as they iron out some of the kinks they might have in their programming or fiscal duties.
Thank you, Keely. Okay.
And again, this is all anecdotal, but earlier this month, Commissioner Klaus had stated that some of these individuals in the Desmond camp that had been offered housing in Maple Court were refusing to go to Maple Court because they struggle with sobriety and they're trying to maintain their sobriety. And Maple Court was a place where drug use was tolerated. And so, it was the lack of accountability and the lack of the community standards being followed at Maple Court made it a dangerous place for these unhoused individuals to go to. And, if that's true, that's deeply concerning that, we've created a place where, individuals that are unhoused and really trying to maintain their sobriety just don't feel comfortable. And, that just doesn't sit right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So hopefully this monitoring process will result in some corrective actions that are satisfying and make it a safer place to be. I'm in complete agreement.
Okay, let's wrap up. We've spent a good amount of time. I think we needed to. Appreciate your time, Keely. Anybody else have a final question, burning question they need answered? Okay, Tom, did you have something? Saw your camera pop up.
Yeah, if I can, Tom Webster. I just wanted to kind of respond as well. So one of the things we're working on is creating additional sites under the right-of-way. So there is the Franz Anderson Tiny Home Village, City of Olympia. We're looking at Quint Street Village, tiny homes. We're trying to create more options because I think you're right, Commissioner Fournier. When there's only one option and it's not the best option for someone, that puts them in a really tough position. So under the right-of-way, we're also looking at acquiring a hotel. So we're trying to create those more options for folks. So it's not just one option. So just wanted to mention that as well.
I do have.
Yeah,
I
appreciate that, Tom, but because even a well-run low barrier shelter may not be the answer for everyone, but we have to make sure that that's the standard for, you know, that our low barrier shelter is a low barrier shelter
Yeah.
in every sense, you know, and following the guidelines and the rules that we've laid out. So that's the issue. But yeah, I do appreciate that even a well-run low barrier shelter is not going to meet everyone's needs, and so we need to have those additional options. Commissioner Fournier.
Yeah, so there's also like, you know, you say, well, every situation's different and every individual is different. And I understand that, but, you know, there's no scenario where we can create a, you know, the perfect bed for every unique situation. So, you know, like, how do we then, you know, set a standard that, you know, basically, you know, how do you manage that? You can't create some, you know, dream scenario for every single individual. You know, and I hear about the, you know, the vision impaired person, and, you know, my heart goes out to him, but like, no matter what, the Maple Court scenario is better than a tent out in the rain and snow, right?
I would argue that you can. I operated a low barrier shelter for 5.5 years, and we have, you know, there's ways to operate a shelter. Shelter is not fun. Shelter is not the best place in the world to be.
Yeah.
You know, if given the choice, nobody's going to choose a mat on the ground. However, I do believe that with, you know, staffing being what it is, that you can have an individualized service model. It doesn't look like you get the blue bed and you get the pink bed and you get the super comfy bed, and, you know, it's not like Goldilocks. It is more about the way in which staff engage with each individual person.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Let's move on to item 2, which is Habitat Conservation Plan update. And I see Brett Burris from CPED to give us that update. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brett Burris, Development Services Manager with Community Planning Economic Development. The Commissioner should have received the HCP update form. As you can see from the form, per direction of the board, we have compared 2023 to the current up-to-date 2024. Please note this report was provided and created on February 1st, 2024. For this year, as you can see, there have been 11 total applications submitted. Applications to be reviewed is 8, and application reviews complete is 3. And of those 3, fees paid and certificate of inclusion issued 1, properties that avoided or excluded 1, and applications with payments pending 1 at this time, for a total mitigation fee collection in 2024 of just over $2,700. And then completed, ready to issue, issued, or finished, and credits available. We have 1 for Olympia Pocket Gopher, 1 for Yelm Pocket Gopher East, 1 for Yelm Pocket Gopher North, and 1 for Oregon Spotted Frog. Now you'll notice there are 4 listed down below, but there are 3 applications in review, and that have been reviewed, and that is because one application has had multiple service areas, which is typically an Oregon Spotted Frog and associated with Pocket Gopher service area. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
I do have one quick question. By any chance, I know this has been a long process to get to this, but it looks like we have Olympia pocket gophers, Tenino pocket gophers, and then what do we have? 3 subspecies or breakdowns of the Yelm pocket gopher? Is that the way the Forest Service has got that?
That is correct.
So okay, I'll let it go. I'll talk to you offline. Thank you.
Brett, what is the, on the completed box, it says CRED available. What is CRED?
Sorry for that. It should have been spelled out. Credits available, meaning that we, Thurston County CPED, has to purchase property in order to increase our credits available. And then once applications are submitted, we compare the mitigation or credits that are being impacted to those credits that we have.
So the numbers in that box are not applicant numbers, they're credits that we've created for
Those
use.
applications those numbers are applications that have been reviewed and approved, and credits available have been determined to be accepted, meaning that we have those credits in order to be able to issue the certificate of inclusion.
Okay, but the number like 19 in the first box, that's 19 applicants who might need 5 credits or 1 credit or a half credit or something there, but the 19 refers to applications.
That's correct.
Any other questions for Brett from the board? Okay, thank you, Brett.
Thank you, commissioners.
Next up is a review of this afternoon's draft agenda for February 6th meeting. The meeting will be called to order at 2 p.m. We'll have Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Mejia. I seem to remember you asked to lead this Pledge of Allegiance. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's correct.
Can that be changed to Commissioner Mejia? Approval of the Tuesday agenda and opportunity for the public to address the board. Item 2 is County Manager's update.
Yes, the only thing I'll be announcing this afternoon is that, under the new calendar, we have no meeting next week. Just a reminder that we're
Board of
only
Health
meeting.
meeting.
Oh, that's right, Board of Health, there is a Board of Health, but no Commissioners meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I would also mention, Commissioner Mincer, that the current copy of the agenda does have Commissioner Mejia for the,
Okay, maybe mine hasn't got swapped out. This is what was in my office. Okay, very good. Consent items, well, and correct me if I get anything else wrong on the agenda, because I might have an old agenda. My consent item has A through D.
through D.
D is in dog?
Yes.
Okay, and item 3A is a public works item, board write-off of uncollectible public works department accounts receivable. Teresa Woolen.
Teresa is here, I'll just lead it off. The state law requires that, under accounting rules, that we write off bad debt. This item is from Public Works to write off accounts that have come delinquent between 2015 through 2017. There are 25 accounts that have become uncollectible because they have reached the statute of limitations. About half of the debt is from companies, and the total amount, $2,284.42, it represents 0.2% of receivables in public works. So a very, very small percentage of what is brought in for the utilities that Public Works operates. And Teresa is here to fill in the blanks or answer any questions that you may have.
Good morning, Teresa. We did review this last week. Remember that number, that very stellar number of recovery. Any questions from the board? You good to go, Teresa?
Good to go.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. This will be item 3A on consent. Item 3B is an auditor voucher list, as is C and D. We have the weeks of January 1st, 8th, and 15th.
Yes, these are all items where the board approves the payments that the county has made. Under all 3 of these voucher lists, there are no tenant improvements for the atrium.
Questions on vouchers from board members? Sure. Very good. Let's go to item 4A. Resolution to update membership of the charter of Thurston County Law and Justice Council. Leah Landon, Criminal Justice Regional Program Manager, is here if we have questions.
Thanks for being here, Leah. This item is an update of the charter for the Thurston County Law and Justice Council. Counties are required to have a Law and Justice Council under RCW 7209-300. The new charter was reviewed by the Law and Justice Council at their meeting on January 18th, and the council, by unanimous vote, recommends to the Board of County Commissioners approval of this charter. The changes are the addition of a few new members, including new members from the tribes, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council would be represented, and the Criminal Justice Program Manager is added. And that is in addition to all of the current members. It also sets a length of term for community members who are optional and appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. Leah, do you have anything to add?
I would just add that originally we had a representative from the Nisqually tribe as well as the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis. And so what we're adding is the Squaxin Island tribe member with this charter. And I know last week we discussed this and there was a question about the county manager being a voting member on this or not. I did go back and check the most recent version of the charter. The county manager is not reflected on that membership list either. I spoke with John Thunheim yesterday and he said his recollection was that that was never an addition for a voting member because there was a commissioner on the voting membership already. So I did not add that member at this time, but if it's something that you all wanted to discuss, happy to do that.
No, we don't want to discuss it.
I figured not, but I wanted to throw it out there. But other than that, yes, Robin summarized very nicely, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Questions for Leah? Okay, very good, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Next up is item 5A, Community Planning and Economic Development, Interagency Agreement between WSU and Thurston County.
This item is the annual agreement that the county has with the Washington State University to provide for WSU extension services. Extension services in the county include assistance for agriculture, water resources. There's a 4-H youth program, the Master Gardener and Composter programs, and a Master Recycling program, and nutrition education, which is especially valuable for our citizens who receive SNAP benefits. The county and Washington State University share the cost under this contract. $172,715 is the county's share, and we have Stephen Bramwell has joined us today. Hi, Stephen, and Jeremy also is here to answer any questions that you may have about this contract.
Thank you, Robin.
I'm going to give, Stephen, you weren't here last week. We talked about it a little bit, but since you're here and you're the guy that knows all the ins and outs, I'll give you the floor.
Okay. Yeah, well, I looked through the questions that were raised. I think that you raised them, Commissioner Edwards, but if there's others, be happy to field, of course, any, from online or here. Do you want me to sort of touch on those points?
Yeah, go ahead. If there was questions that you heard.
Or you want to repeat it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, good questions. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first one was the balance of the contribution from WSU and the county. And so we just passed out the impact report, and that's the best source for information on that page 3. So if you just look at that one, it's got a balance of the source of funding for the extension program, that coming from the county, and then that coming from WSU. And then within the county, we break it out further because this is a question that was of interest in the past. How much comes from the general fund versus comes from, programmatic relationships with, solid waste or through tipping fees and that sort of thing. So the figures here show WSU's, there's a few different lines of support within WSU, but that totals out to 584,403. We do bring in specific grants. I'm looking at the pie chart in the bottom left right now. So 584, 403, and then the gray slice is 466, 338. That's grant funding, and it's direct to our county programs. That's not like a grants that's allocated to another area of WSU and we get a small piece of it or something. That's all dedicated here. And then the counties there at 539, 339. And then that 539, 339 breaks down into the general fund and the non-general fund at around 320 and 220 on the balance. These are a little bit dated, so we're in the process of re-upping our impact report for 2023. We go back over the WSU budget, go over the county budget. There's been changes and updates. These wouldn't be what you'd see if you pulled a report, today, but it'd be pretty darn close.
It's impressive.
Yeah, this is good breakdown.
Yeah.
Questions
thanks.
on the budget issue?
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Questions?
Yeah, it's a good one, because you're not the first to be curious of how much money and where does it come from. We do like to give props to, and you saw the big assemblage of Master Gardener, Master Recycler, Composter volunteers in here earlier this year. They make a big contribution, and so we do value that using a figure from it's called, what do we refer to it as? There's a national listing of a salary rate that's fair to apply to volunteer hours. So when we value that, you get another 840,000 coming from all the hours that people are putting.
Could I ask one question, maybe a little bit off topic, but how's the deal coming with pollinators, being you're the ag man?
Say it again.
Pollinators, how we coming on
Oh geez, that's such a big
pollinators?
question.
I mean, I think that is a
That's
big problem that's not recognized by society quite as much as it should be.
Yeah, it is a huge question. What could I provide you that would be?
Are we making headway? I don't know.
If you looked at it nationally and globally, I mean, I'd go out on a limb in terms of not having review some of the latest pollinator research that's out there, but I would probably suspect it wouldn't be a very pretty picture. Just on the basis of transitions in agriculture to utilize more closed loop farming systems, things you and I have talked about, whether it's integration of animals into the farm or integration of diversity on the farm that provides for habitat that allows us to move away from some of the chemicals that impact invertebrates. The invertebrate crisis, I think, as people are well aware, is huge and it's ongoing. And that not only affects invertebrates, and it affects bird species. And
I'm not.
What's that?
We should have,
I mean,
a breakdown someday,
what, invertebrate crisis?
not here at agenda setting maybe.
Yeah, maybe not an agenda setting, but there is a large scale loss of insects. I think they call it insectageddon, I think is a.
I remember grasshoppers being everywhere as a kid, and I never see them anymore. So that's a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing, yeah. Anecdotally, some people have commented on the lack of insects that are on your windshield after you go on a road trip, or on your headlights. There's just not as many as there used to be. And a lot of that can be traced back to the broad use insecticides in the environment. Yeah.
Except mosquitoes. I mean.
Yeah, we have an ambiguous relationship with mosquitoes. Sure, they roll.
I tried in the past putting together like a program where like public space could be set aside for beekeepers and things like that. And it's also hard to do that. Like just getting the engagement from the beekeepers, I thought would be much easier than I thought.
Yeah.
Well, they've got about a 5-mile range or something.
Yeah, and you could set, here's public space nobody's doing something with. Here's put a fence around it. Beekeepers,
We
go
do
to
have
town.
some great folks that work on farmscaping and pollinator resources in the Master Gardener program. And I recently worked with Penny Longwell to put up a page on our extension site, providing resources on how to support pollinators and the resources we should be planting outside. So, the bright spot is there's so much that we can do.
One of our own professors out at Evergreen had worked quite a bit on some kind of mushroom that was coming up with a natural assistance to pollinators, mainly for bees.
Fungi Perfecti and Evergreen State College and WSU collaborated on like a fungal product that was supported bees. I think it had to do with colony collapse disorder.
Did it mites and different things, resistance.
Yep.
Did they ever get anything going? Someday I'd like to, sounds like I've got at least another commissioner, I'd like to hear a little more about that at some point.
Do you think setting up public like pollination stations, like setting aside public property where it exists that nobody's doing anything with it for pollinators or for beekeepers would be worth?
Yes, yes. I mean, there's a lot more that we could do in terms of seeding wildflower mixes out on ag land, on hay
There's
fields.
a lot of just dormant county property out there.
And there's opportunity too through the HCP. I know that we just had a little update a few minutes ago to work with farmers integrating forbs into grasslands. Grassland, I mean, speaking of pollinators, speaking of birds, it's the largest, those are the insects and birds that utilize those habitats that are also heavily used by agriculture are those that are the most threatened.
Yeah.
So we know we need to be doing more with floral nectary resources in grasslands and on our hay fields and pastures. And county ground, you have Violet Prairie West, just down, close to Tenino. We'll be actively seeding out there with forbs and managing for pollinators and bird species. So yeah, it's a great topic, and it's something that's not just affecting Thurston County, it's a national and global issue. We've seen collapses in grassland species, and it's continuing to this day. And it's development and it's agriculture that simplifies the landscape. This is such a tangent, but I'm happy to talk about it, as you can tell.
Here's a bigger tangent. I finally got around to cooking the buckwheat pancakes last weekend that you brought,
Tell me about it. I've been waiting to
It was
do it.
great.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
If we can make honey flow like water, we could become the mead center of the country as well.
Yeah, well, we do have buckwheat set aside that was harvested in Thurston County for the pancake breakfast at the county fair.
Oh, cool.
So we harvested it, it was down in South County near Rochester. So, yeah, we've got it, that has not been forgotten.
So I some of the terminology used isn't familiar to me, so maybe I'm off base, but is there a way to make these things that Commissioner Edwards and Fournier are talking about, like, jive with the set asides we have for pocket gopher lands, prairie? I mean, is there ways to, the county's got to conserve all this land, and can pocket gophers and bees live in peace and harmony? Or
Yeah, yeah, I think I had a poster that said, "Can we all live together at the county fair?" And it was like gophers and cows and birds and yes, and less.
Because what you're saying about empty lands, like we're actively acquiring land that we don't intend to be doing other stuff with. So if we can make it fit several programs, that's a win-win. People like to see that.
Yeah, one of the proposals I made in working with Chris Chapeau as she was developing the HCP and her team. And I know that there's funding within the HCP to allocate not only towards land protection, whether it's acquisition or easements, but also there's long-term management, in perpetuity or long periods of time, whatever it may be. That management affords for on-the-ground improvements to those sites. And so that's an area where there's resources where that can be done. Now, that can be on private farmland to help people manage for species biodiversity. And it can be used on protected sites too that are set aside. I mean, those two will need to be maintained to higher levels for habitat value. But they shouldn't, one thing that we tried to get away from with the HCP is seeing, preservation, to see conservation and farming in opposition. Now, so there are opportunities for both, and our farmland can be definitely enhanced to provide habitat.
I think if I remember correctly, we worked really hard with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to bring the two together in the HCP. And helping U.S. Fish and Wildlife realize the value of our farmlands and the preservation of the species that we have in the HCP. So,
yeah. Well, it's really, again, we're off topic, but it's
fun though.
It's a smart thing to do, even across the whole county.
Mm-hmm.
But it really comes into focus when you look at what the Port and Tumwater are trying to do, where they're dealing with a much more constrained footprint for achieving their objectives. And they're gonna have to, layer the uses and the values in order to maximally count, their credits and being able to achieve all the things that they need to do.
Yep. It would be, somewhat worthwhile to think about the Ag HCP nexus and spend some time looking at the organizations working on that topic, not only WSU, but some of our partners at the district, Eco Studies, CNLM, because there's a lot of work in that area, and there's a big opportunity for it because it's a big land area and it can make a big impact in terms of whether it's birds, pollinators, or grazing animals, and doing that all together as well as enabling county development. But that could be, I'd be happy to talk more about that.
Sounds like a future work session.
Does sound like it.
There was a second question associated with the use of funding for SNAP Ed or for Master Gardeners from a Public Health Foundation. Is that right?
Foundational Public Health funding, trying to look for other non-general fund sources for the pie chart you showed us.
Always trying to protect the general fund.
Commissioner Edwards is our watchdog on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's fair. So the benefit of the SNAP Ed program that Robin introduced, focusing on eating and healthy living habits, is that the funding for that program, the Thurston County actually gets that program for almost for free. So you provide office and some in-kind support, because Amanda Musser is our program lead there, and she comes out to the extension office. But that's all funded through separate funding through the state of Washington. And so the majority of that is actually gratis or a benefit, just on the basis of having SNAP Ed programs in different counties. So, so that's good. It's not a general fund impact, just to that point.
We just want a quick thing, because we're pressed.
Yeah.
Do you have solar panels on your office space?
No, when we renovated, I reached out to.
I mean, that ought to be a must, I think, to figure out a way to do that.
Can we dip into our reserves to install that?
I'm real interested. If we're gonna talk the talk, we should walk the walk, is where I'm from.
All right.
Just think about it.
Everybody good on this agenda item?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
All right,
See you guys.
thank you.
Thanks for coming in, Steve.
Let's go to item 6A, emergency services. Description, so is contract for fiscal year 23 Homeland Security Grant. Ben Miller Todd is here to give us a summary.
Yep, I'll start. So this item is to accept funding that is federal pass-through money. The federal money passes through the Washington State Military Department to support Region 10, Homeland Security Region 10 in Washington State. This region includes Grace Harbor County, Lewis County, Mason County, Pacific County, and Thurston County. Thurston is the fiduciary agent in support of the region, and the funding that's coming through will support the entire region, not just Thurston County. The money will be used for planning, equipment, training, and other activities throughout the region. This funding goes through December of 2025 and is just a little over $278,000. And Ben, if you'd like to add anything, I'm turning it over to you.
Absolutely, that was great. I'll add one more thing because I always like a little bit more goodwill. That this is about $76,000 in the placeholder that was placed in the 24-25 biennium. And with that, I have nothing further to add.
No questions, looks like. Thanks, Ben.
Absolutely.
All right, up next is Public Health and Social Services Contract Award for Thurston County Hazardous Waste Management Plan Update.
Okay, this plan was last updated in 2014, and the county is receiving a grant from the Department of Ecology to use to contract for an update of the hazardous waste management plan. The county received one response to the RFP that was issued. The funding will be used in part to pay for staff. It will include conversations with staff, citizen focus groups, SWAC members, and other contact with the community that will all be used to inform a plan that meets the needs of the entire community, as well as meeting the requirements of state and federal regulations. We anticipate the plan will be completed in December of 2024, and I see Stuart on the screen to fill in any blanks or answer questions that the board may have.
I could add one thing was that we, obviously would have liked to receive more bids. It's always good to have more bids, but this happened to be a really good bid from a company that Public Works solid waste is very familiar with and has had a good relationship with in the past, that we kind of check with them as part of our due diligence, and we're kind of all on board with this as a great contractor to work with. So we're hoping you support that.
Commissioner Edwards.
Any chance we could get a bit of we could add Department of Ecology where the money is coming from? And I don't know, it doesn't read, if you take a look at, for the vice chair, what he's gonna have to read, I think it needs to be adjusted a little bit.
So this isn't accepting a grant, we've already done that. We just happen to mention that the money from ecology is used. This is actually awarding the contract to the vendor who will write the plan.
Okay, this is awarding the contract
That's
to.
right.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's where the confusion was.
Anything else from board members on this item? Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
Public Works is next. 8A, interlocal agreement with City of Lacey for Marvin Road Upgrade Phase 1 project.
Great. So you may recall last week when you reviewed these two items, both A and B, these items are related to a plan where we are coordinating with the City of Lacey for the Marvin Road update. And you may recall reviewing this map where Matt talked about the overarching plan and the parts that these two items support. And I'm gonna just hand it right over to you to talk more about these two items.
Good morning. Yeah, the first item with this is an interlocal agreement with the City of Lacey. This agreement provides for the city to fully fund their water and sewer infrastructure improvements, which are within the bounds of our roadway improvement project. Is there any questions on the interlocal?
I have just one quick question. Is Laurel Oaks, is that on Lacey Sewer and Water?
I believe it is. I'm not positive, but I know their water.
I just wondered if not.
I know their water and sewer does run right past there.
I mean, it seems if it's not, it'd be a shame not to, especially if you're gonna dig it up, put the connection in if it's not there. Maybe you could ask about that. We're gonna go ahead with it anyway, but I mean, it's just.
I can find that out.
Anybody else? Question? Ben? If not.
The second item is the approval to call for advertisement and sealed bids.
Okay, this is 8B.
Yes.
Yep, go ahead.
And that is to get approval to go out to bid and advertise the project. Any questions?
Seeing none. Okay. Sounds like we're good to go. Thank you. Thank you. One more Public Works item is 8C, set a public hearing to consider application of Public Utility District Number 1 of Thurston County for a non-exclusive franchise for a water system within Thurston County rights-of-way.
Great. This item is an extension of the franchise agreement that the county has with Thurston Public Utility District Number 1. And this permits the district to construct, operate, and maintain a water system in Thurston County rights-of-way in unincorporated areas where the utility district provides services. The last agreement has been in place for 16 years. And we have Craig on the screen who can give additional information or answer any questions that you may have.
Good morning, Commissioners. Craig Sisson, Real Estate Services Manager with Public Works. I think Interim Manager Robin Campbell covered the basics of it, but I am here to answer any questions.
Commissioner Edwards.
Is there a time frame associated with this, Craig? I mean, are we
it is set.
25 years or?
It's 10 years, 10 to 20 years are what our typical franchises. are, so they do have to be renewed. It allows us to update legal language within the document, so we don't have things that are 50, 60, 70 years old.
But yet you don't generally refer to that as for a period of time for.
Correct.
You just extend it periodically.
This is a new one. This is a replacement. It's not an extension. This is a replacement franchise. So we don't just extend.
So how long will it be good for? I'm just curious, forever?
I believe this one is a 10-year franchise.
Is that standard? That's the good deal versus 25 years or 2 years.
Correct. Some of the pipeline, Olympic pipeline that runs through was a little bit longer. That was a special case, Puget Sound Energy. They had one that was 25 years. So it depends, but typically they are 10 years is what we like to start with, and then I can negotiate from there.
It's outside my bailiwick, so I'm fine with it.
Any other questions for Craig? Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is standing items and then a 3:30 public hearing on A25 Forest Lands Conversion Code Update. Dan Bowers, I think I saw her sneak in. Come on up once. Just in case we have questions.
Yep.
It's just a public hearing, obviously, but good to remind us just kind of what we're going to be hearing public comment about. Go ahead, Manager Campbell.
So this item is public hearing on amendments to the Forest Lands Conversion and Tree Protection Standards in Thurston County Code. There was significant community engagement in the development of this plan. Many meetings with the community members. The Planning Commission had 2 work sessions. They recommended approval on a 5-2 vote on September 20 of 2023. The board held work sessions on November 2nd and November 29th. You set this public hearing for today, and depending on what you hear and the will of the board, you could take action immediately following, or we have a follow-up work session scheduled, I think. Is it scheduled yet? No, but we could if you want additional work sessions on this. And I'm gonna turn it over to Dana if you have anything to add.
Dana Bowers, Associate Planner, Community Planning, Economic Development. Thank you very much for having me today. We just want to make sure that the public can, or you requested that we have a public hearing so that we can hear public comment on the changes to the Forest Conversion Code. And County Manager covered it nicely. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Have you received any public comment for now? Any written public comment?
Yeah, we have 4 commenters. I'll be sending that to you once the deadline is at noon today. So we want to make sure we include everyone up until the deadline and then pass that along to the county clerk.
Can you, let's see, a couple of questions. So first of all, are we going to be addressing the entirety of that, of your work on this item? It's not broken up like the ag into different, okay. And then how much have you guys seen the briefing on this item? The new commissioners?
We had a briefing
Separately.
about a month and a half ago.
Okay, because it's pretty complicated, I know. I mean, for me, it's like, it took me 2 sessions with you to even really understand it. So I just wanted to make sure the new commissioners had that benefit. And then the public, I don't know how much detail you're planning to, it's always, it's always a kind of a question of how much to kind of go into the basics for people. There may not be no one in the room, who knows? But I'm just wondering, just what was your plan for kind of going over it again as an introduction for the public hearing?
For the public hearing, I wanted to keep it a little bit high level just because I only have the 2 minutes to kind of give an introduction.
2 minutes?
I think so.
No.
No?
You have as much time as I give you.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
you have as much time as you need. I mean,
Sure.
that's why I'm asking. Like, if you were saying like, I need half, I need 50, I mean, we can tell you how much time for an introduction. You're not limited to 4 minutes of a public or whatever. You can,
Well, the code changes kind of fit into a few different categories, and so I was going to talk about the categories a little bit more than the nuances and the details, just because it really does more pertain to the development pieces, and that's who I did a lot of my stakeholder engagement with as a development community. You know, a lot of the foresters say, I never do this kind of permit, so this really doesn't have a lot to do with me. And it is that conversion from one use to another. So people who are commercially harvesting and replanting again, this has very little to do with them. So not to say that they won't want to be involved, or if they want to have comments, that we're absolutely want to talk to them and make sure that the forestry pieces line up as well. And also keeping focused on really who is going to have the largest amount of impact from this.
I remember that element, there's like the element of creating, I'm gonna mess up the details. I had it go on my notes, I'll review them, but there was the kind of the main piece, I'll call it, where you're talking about the different pathways and consolidating and creating like one pathway or something. But then there was like kind of sub-issue where I'm trying to remember, it was like giving people, if they only cut 80% or something, they could avoid having to do something else. I'm forgetting the details of this, but
okay.
that element is probably worth a little bit of explanation, because it was complex to understand, and why a compromise was made. We're basically because I've heard some chatter since that you and I talked about it, and people are wondering about that element of it, because it's like, well, it seems permissive, but it's sort of trying to find a sweet spot of what will actually be a net positive and incentivize the use of the mechanism, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah.
Is that the release of the moratorium?
The release of the moratorium was the pathways that he talked about first, and then the other piece was the conversion option harvest plan, which removes the moratorium. So the optional harvest plan is the confusing bit.
Yeah,
and it doesn't get used right now.
Yeah, and you had consulted with Pierce County on that to see what was being, so that element, if you could just, a few more sentences to explain that, so, because it's pretty inscrutable to someone that might be sitting here, like, seeing this for the first time.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions for Dana? Yeah.
How much change is taking place from what we have today? I mean, do we have 10 pages of this ordinance, if you will, and now we're gonna have 27, or we're gonna have 6? That'd be my first question. And then I am wondering about danger trees, if they're addressed in this process.
So your first question about change, we are repealing and replacing a whole chapter, and part of that is to make that chapter more clear. And so that chapter itself probably decreased by a number of pages, just because there were pieces in that had divided amongst North County and the rest of unincorporated county and laid out 2 separate sets of standards. So it was kind of double. And from the discussions with the Planning Commission and yourselves and outlining the scope, it was within the purview of the project to bring those into alignment and have one set of standards. So that really kind of reduced, I guess, that volume, if you want to talk about it in pages, but also kind of clarifying. Coming from a little bit more of a communications and understanding background, it was really important to me that we clarify the code and make it as simple as possible, and that means reducing words, so did a lot of that kind of scrubbing. Also, we added an entire new chapter, so kind of reducing in some areas and adding in some areas, but just keeping that clarity and consistency as we can throughout. So those are the big changes. We did change a couple of small things in some other chapter or in some other titles, 13, 14, 20, and 26, just to keep it consistent with this code because of the definition changes and other pieces. And then when you're speaking about danger trees, that definition lives in the critical areas in 1715.
Title 24.
Title 24, excuse me. It lives in Title 24, so we, well, that definition is already set in place, and I've started talking to the other municipalities about whether or not that definition needs to be adapted, but we left that alone for now because, you know, this is a 4-phase project, and we'll have opportunities to make sure that comes into alignment in other places. But for now, there wasn't a huge concern about that definition. And so because the definition is in place, then we didn't touch it or didn't really make any changes to that parameter here.
Did legal review some of this stuff? And I'll say specifically the danger trees is my concern, because we have had trees that have done a lot of damage. And when the county says you can't take something down, but then it goes through the middle of the house, I don't know about the exposure.
Sure. And that, so the legal did review this code prior to you and signed off on it, so.
And they look at stuff like that. I mean, I'm on the insurance risk side of things, and so I'm just wondering if that was taken into consideration.
One of the pieces that's important to consider is that the hazard tree, you know, as we talk about tree removal in general, up to 5,000 board feet can be removed from properties over 2 acres. Under 2 acres, I'll have to double check that.
Mostly on this, I think it's more in residential areas where trees started off pretty small 40 years ago.
Is that per year or?
Yeah.
It's quite a bit. You
And
can
now
still
it's
remove
a
every
great
year.
big tree, and it's a problem.
I think there's two different set of standards that would apply, so
Right.
a danger tree, if you're outside of any type of critical area,
Right.
you can cut that tree down, it's gonna be under that 5,000 board feet, and we don't need to really see that. But if you're in a critical area, that's where the hazard tree provisions of the code would apply. This project does not affect
That
those
critical
codes.
area.
And does it need to be 5 acres of property, or if you have a half-acre
No,
lot?
it's just whether you're inside a critical area or shorelines or something like that.
Okay.
What is the minimum, what is the definition of a tree? Is there like a minimum, if it's over 18 inches in diameter, like, you got a bunch of little tiny baby trees that can be mowed with a lawnmower.
Right, so the definition is 6 inches in diameter base height. So
Okay.
DBH is how we measure, and that's 6 inches in diameter. at
If
this
it's under 6 inches in diameter, it's a bush and nobody cares about it.
I think the technical term is sapling.
Okay?
Yeah.
Of any species?
Wayne, we care.
Well, okay, but of any species? So if it's an Oregon white oak under 6 inches, is that,
Oregon white oak is covered under the critical areas because it's it constitutes a protected habitat. So they have different rules, and those are also not part of this code because already protected under another code.
Kind of like what we were talking about yesterday, the agritourism.
cannabis?
Separate, well, just the structure of a code, like, you could draft it all into where it's in every section it could possibly apply to, or you keep it in a separate chapter. It's always
Is there any portion of this that's kind of the legacy thing that you're working on? Does it
This is
cover?
residential stuff, right?
well,
That's usually in
it's not
larger
about,
scales.
it does tie into carbon sequestration and trying to reduce unnecessary conversion of loss of tree canopy countywide. I mean, it's not specifically protecting a certain age of tree, but it's trying to reduce the amount of forest cover we lose as we try to.
But is that always on forest lands? Or is that on somebody's lot? I guess that's what I'm
Is
wondering.
what always on.
Well, is the legacy thing always involve forest lands, like what could be logged versus a home that's got 4 trees that are now out of control in size? And it's just a matter of time before something's gonna happen. That's kind of what I'm wondering about, if it has some common sense provisions in it that, because a lot of these developments were put in place and people planted a lot of little trees that you could mow with a lawnmower, I suppose, and those trees are now 3 feet through. And people are looking at them kind of skeptical that, yeah, wait a minute, if that thing comes down in a windstorm, I'm minus a house. And that's what I'm trying to play into this common sense end of it.
Right. And again, that would come into whether it's under that 5,000 board feet.
Okay.
I think those are, as far as the provisions go, that still applies. And that's a state standard that we don't have jurisdiction.
What does 5,000 board feet look like? in
About 2
trees?
truckloads.
Two
About
log
2
truckloads?
Yes.
Not like pickup truckloads?
No.
So 2 log truckloads are still permissible every year.
Every year.
That's a lot of trees.
It's a
Yeah.
state standard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would emphasize that during the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, yeah, Andy and Dana. It is 10:35. We're gonna take 10 minutes and then we'll pick up with, item 4.
Toby Keith.
Okay, 10:48 a.m. We are back with our agenda setting work session on February 6th. We left off with item 4. And proclamations awards we addressed yesterday. Am I looking at the clerk of the board? So we don't have to address that today, correct? Okay, and same with advisory boards. I saw no packet. We caught up on those?
Not caught up. We don't have items today, but I will have items next week.
Okay. So those are just standing items. We'll readdress those next week. PIO check-in. No check-in. We got a chance to meet our 2 new staffers, and we're excited to have them. Let's go on to item 7, Commissioner items. Item sub 1 is a field trip, Coyote Village discussion.
You want me to?
Yep.
So I went to the Quixote celebration a couple of weeks ago, and they, as I was speaking with the executive director, she brought up the Carpenter site and having that conversation with us. But she also mentioned she would love to take us to the Mason County village that they have, because that's kind of what they're planning to do, kind of that model is what they're planning to do at the Carpenter site. So having us see it, you know, they said would be just beneficial for all of us, kind of to see what they would be planning on the Carpenter, and you could ask any questions at that time. So I was talking with our county manager and thought that maybe a field trip with commissioners and staff would be great. Our housing staff kind of just going down to Quixote Village and kind of taking a look at.
Coyote Village, you mean in Mason County?
In Mason County,
Is that what
yeah.
they call it?
I'm not sure what they call it, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
I'm just going.
Just making sure. I
Yeah.
understand. So you're asking the board members whether we would like to arrange that?
Yes,
It would be all of us.
yes, and our housing staff, I think our housing team would be also benefit from going.
Commissioner Klaus says yes.
All right.
I'm good.
I don't know if I'm good. I mean, I'm kind of on this whole process until we start keeping track of who's coming. I'm kind of a standalone on that issue. You know, as far as where they're coming from.
Kansas City?
Yes, that's exactly right. I don't think I need to dwell on it, but I've been to Coyote Village before.
I have not been. I'd
Good,
like
good
to.
operation.
What is the nexus of our relationship with that facility?
Well, do you want to give the historical?
So the, for the Cody Village that's over in, the Mottman area, the county owns the property and has a very long-term lease, with Coyote Village, and I think we lease it for like $1 a year, to them. So I think it's like a 25 or 50-year lease. And they have requested that the county consider allowing the use of our Carpenter Road property for Coyote Village 2 is what they termed it. So we've asked Tom and Keeley to find out more about what exactly that proposal is. We have a work session later this month, I think it's later this month, to follow up on that and give more information to the board. But this would be one more opportunity to see how the model works.
This Friday at Olympia Timberland Library, they're doing a big presentation on the history of Coyote Village, and there's gonna be people that kind of were there from the beginning talking about its origins and what's worked. So it's 6:15 on the 8th at the Olympia Timberland Library. They're doing a presentation on that.
Nice.
6:15 in the evening.
It's on, Rob Richards posted it on Facebook. And,
I'll be in DC.
I'll be in DC.
I do have a
Just
question.
love saying that, don't you? It's called Exhibit Opening, Community Roots, an oral history project about visionaries and change makers, Thursday, February 8th from 5 to 7, program at 6:15. Come experience the stories through an interactive exhibit and discussion with project participants, snacks provided at the Olympia Timberland Library. And there'll be a handful of folks from the street community and their close allies and advocates, and how they plan to organize and launch a tent city in downtown Olympia that grew to become Quixote Village.
Camp Quixote is where it started.
Yeah.
And there were limitations on how long camps could be in any one place, and they were seeking more stability, and a lot of things happened that came together and created the village. It was pretty exciting. So I bet that that'll be a very interesting.
I think it sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have 4 commissioners willing to attend. If you can find a time in our schedule that we
Right.
can do such a thing.
So we'll ask someone to start working on scheduling that.
I'll send
And
you
if
the
it
flyer.
falls right, I'm not saying that I wouldn't
Sure.
go if it falls
Check
right.
it out. Okay.
But when we talk about Carpenter Road, when will we be at least letting the community know that there's something percolating so they don't feel surprised?
I think that we need to just start out by finding out what the proposal even is. So I think we're a long way from getting to that.
Tom and Keely have a meeting on this Thursday, the 8th.
I think the Quixote model, right, it is definitely higher barrier housing there, clean housing.
Right.
So it's, and they're permanent, supportive housing as well. So, their model is, kind of also what we need in our community as well. And, I'm really curious to see kind of what they've done in Mason County and what model they have over there. And, I know it's not the tiny homes, I know it's something different. So just kind of seeing how it looks, how it's run, and, hearing what their plans are for Carpenter site. I think if we decide to go that route, will also prepare us once we start doing community outreach towards that community around there to actually give them the correct information on what is going to go in there. So finding out more about the project, I agree with the interim county manager.
I guess maybe one thing, being we are discussing it, so I think the community has a right to know kind of where I'm at on this, and my concern on these is that we prioritize our homeless veterans and our own local people that have fallen on hard times, especially senior citizens. And I'm just not looking forward to creating another spot for people to flee from Kansas City to here, because we take good care of our homeless folks. I want to make sure we prioritize our own people first. Just, not that we can't try to help, but help our own first.
Also, I have a random kind of thought. This is an island, right, within Lacey?
I'm sorry, what?
Carpenter Road.
This Carpenter Road site is essentially an island within Lacey.
I don't
Olympia?
think so. It's just a
Just county
piece of
property?
property
Okay.
that we own.
Okay.
We currently really don't make much use of the property. Public Works stages, large vehicles on the
Okay.
property. I think it's fully fenced. But we're not doing anything
Okay.
with it. One of the things that the board may consider, if not this, then what? What
Yeah.
do we want to do with that property?
Fees.
Well, yeah, that, or Animal Services approached us about that property for their new building, and we said, no, thank you. And, but at one point it had been considered for RV parking, and that was not acceptable to the
RV
majority of the
storage.
board.
No, not RV storage, like RV.
No, it was, the proposal
declaring
was
the
to
Hanson
use
Road.
for temporary parking of RVs, to be able to clear a space where they were, not appropriate, but that was not, accepted.
What about surplusing it and selling it?
That's also completely up to the board, what
Yeah.
you would like to do with it. Or we could continue to keep it and use it for public works, for a staging area.
I do think the city of Olympia, they have an adjoining property and they were doing something about, transfer station for, solid waste or something like that at some point. I don't know where that's at.
If
That
not
was in the
this,
plan.
then we could certainly explore other possibilities for this property.
Because they run their own garbage systems.
Okay,
It's in the city of Olympia, not the city of Lacey.
I don't know exactly,
Uh,
but
you know,
we knew
the-
at one time, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the boundary lies. We'd have to look.
let's go to item 2, Veterans Fund.
So this is just an update. Commissioners may have seen an email from our assessor who was concerned. I'm going to step back. During the budget process, the board approved use of a small amount of the Veterans Fund money to support the assessor's staff who are reviewing applications for a senior exemption to the property tax. And we had legal advice that if the applicant had a head of household who was a veteran, then the funding could be used for Veterans Fund could be used to cover that cost. And we use that as a creative way to reduce the impact of budget cuts on the assessor. There were questions raised after the budget was passed about the acceptable use of the fund. Rob and I were part of a meeting last week with John Thunheim, Stephen Drew, we included David Bain, Brandon Weber, Scott Cushing, who given us the legal advice, where we all agreed that if it was structured in a very specific way, that this would still be an acceptable use of the fund. However, Brandon has asked us to send the question to the state auditor. So that is being done, and we will be waiting for an answer from the state auditor. In the meantime, we are going to assume that it is a legal use of the fund as the prosecutor's office has done their analysis. And Brandon agrees that if it follows certain guidelines, that it is legal. So we're gonna go forward as if it is for now.
And
So
we'll-
that's an update.
And we'll need to update the policy for. the
Yes,
fund.
thank you. That is the other piece. Thank you very much, Rob. So to make it all fit, we need to bring to the board a change to the veterans program, where we add this as an allowable use. The normal process for that is to run that proposal through the Veterans Advisory Committee. So we'll see what their recommendation is. But at that time, we'll be asking you to, in order to support the budget, we would need to make this change to policy. So that's coming.
Okay, and if the Veterans Advisory Board, my understanding is there are staff members that don't agree with this, and there's a prediction that the Veterans Advisory Board won't agree with it. And so I think the commissioners need to think about then what will be our course of action.
I agree.
Whether we're gonna move forward with our decision or not.
That's right.
And if not, then we need to know how we're dealing with the assessor's budget shortfall. So those are questions that need to
How many
be
dollars are we talking about?
$60,000.
Worth knowing.
Okay, any questions about this item? Okay, next up is item 7.3, public safety sales tax non-supplant.
So on this item, also an update at the request of Commissioner regarding the public safety sales tax and the non-supplanting clause. And it's my understanding that other officials were raising concerns about the non-supplanting language. You will be meeting with them on the 12th. So that's coming up, but in the meantime, you asked that Elizabeth be available to talk with you about the state of this item. So Elizabeth is here.
Hi.
And we're going to start this off in a open session, but should you get to a point where you feel that the advice you need is legal advice and Elizabeth agrees, then we would go into an executive session. So we're going to start it off like this.
Could you
Yes?
outline what the concerns are that have been voiced?
I have not talked to the other officials specifically, but it is my understanding that the concern is the method that the board used to set the minimum amount of maintenance of effort level to ensure non-supplanting.
I don't know what maintenance of effort is. What's that role? It boils
It's like the
down to.
baseline with which we can't go
Right.
below, right?
The board absolutely cannot spend less than what you spent on these activities that are allowable in the public safety sales tax. There is a baseline amount that you cannot go below.
It's really about the definition of the word supply, because, we were talking about this when we were developing the resolution. I was giving hypotheticals where, like, if a certain strand of funding was funding a program that became defunct, or the state started funding it or something, it seemed ridiculous to me that you'd have to keep funding something that was a waste of money. So that was one, if you're looking at it like programmatically, that would be a concern and kind of a gray area. Robin then did, I think, as I understood it, you did some kind of follow-up research and thinking, and it's really just, it's not looking at program by program, it's really looking at a level of funding, which takes away all those complications from all of my hypotheticals. If it's defined, which I understand, well, Elizabeth will tell us, but if it's defined as a level of funding.
And that's what we did, right? It was like 2023, this much was spent on TCSO.
Yeah, so we're not going
so
below
we never
that.
go below that.
Never
That's
below.
No matter what programs fall under that bucket, that
Right.
makes it simpler in a sense, and so and if that's the legal way to handle it, then that's simpler.
Exactly how
But that's kind of
non-supplanting
what, I think there were questions from the different stakeholders, and I see the sheriff behind my right shoulder. You might as well come up.
So
and-
what's the
I'm
issue?
sure at some point we'll have a question for you.
Over
or-
time and
Well,
inflation,
but
that
again,
number, that
you'll be
bottom line
having
becomes
this
less relevant.
conversation with the sheriff, the prosecutor.
We are,
The
so just-
auditor.
Plan on intruding on that conversation. If you guys had specific questions about
Yeah.
anything not associated to that.
Okay,
Right.
let's go to Elizabeth.
So,
and
yes,
see
please.
What you have to say about it.
Good morning, Commissioners. What I'm here today is to simply, what my purpose today is to simply explain what you have done with your actions. And I do not anticipate going into an executive session because the actions you have taken to date, there's no question in my mind are consistent. Now, the discussion that you just had is a whole different discussion. But I want to make sure you understand where you are and what actions you have and have not taken so far. So the first action you took related to the public safety tax is you passed the resolution to put this measure before the voters. And that was resolution 16289, which was adopted back in July 27th. And this was you decided that you wanted to leverage a sales and use tax for public safety under the authority of the statute 8214-450. So you adopted this resolution, you prepared a ballot title, and in that resolution, there was a clause added about non-supplanting. And I think as you understood, this non-supplanting clause was not required by the statute which authorized you to put this sales tax before the voters. Which is interesting because sometimes the sales and use chapter sections do have supplanting language in them. For example, the county has leveraged the treatment sales tax for a source of revenue for the county. That particular statute did have language talking about supplanting. And in that statute, it was very clear what supplanting meant and what it didn't mean. In our case, what we're talking about right now, which is the public safety tax, there is no statutory language guiding the interpretation of supplanting. Instead, the county commissioners made a choice to self-impose a non-supplanting clause. And that clause is very brief. It has no detail, unlike the state statutes when they're using supplanting language. So the clause in your resolution simply says, well, it's not simply, but what it says is, whereas all money received shall not be used to supplant funding for any ongoing services and or programs. So that was the action you took in July. The voters approved this measure. And after that, after the county knew it was approved, there were a couple of different budget actions that the board took. The first two budget actions the board took was to create funds, two separate funds, to put the revenue from the public safety tax. One fund was for the sheriff, because 75% of the revenue coming in would be deposited pursuant to the resolution, pursuant to the resolution that put this forward to the voters. 75% of the revenue would go to the sheriff. And that fund further said that the purpose of this fund for the sheriff may be expended for law enforcement protection, including hiring additional sheriff deputies and associated infrastructure as stated in Resolution 16289. The second action the board took was they adopted a second fund for the prosecutor's office, public defense office, and the auditor's office, because 25% of the tax revenue as specified in the original resolution was directed to those offices. Again, the purpose of the fund for the prosecutor's office and public defense was limited to be expended for additional prosecution and proportionate public defense services and election security infrastructure, as stated in Resolution 16289. The last budget action you took related to this fund was in the biennium Thurston County operating budget, including the general fund. And in this resolution, you provided an attachment which had a list of provisos for this budget. Proviso number 18 says that for the First Amendment of this biennium budget, which I understand happens in May, April or May, the board will, the board hasn't taken this action yet. Just to be clear, it says that in the future, in the First Amendment, in the springtime, the board, will transfer general fund expender appropriations into the respective sheriff, public safety tax fund, and in the other fund for the prosecutor, public defense, and auditor. Yes, Wayne, excuse me, Commissioner.
It's fine. Does the non-supplanting language, does it apply to both those funds? Or is it just the sheriff's department?
Both.
Both? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Carry on.
So again, going back to this proviso, there are certain general fund appropriations which will be transferred into the sheriff. Basically, it's defined, it's talked about as a baseline year for non-supplanting purposes. And for the public sales tax is set at 2023. That's just the language in the proviso. And then it identifies a certain amount of funding based on that baseline fund that will go into these respective funds. Those are the only actions, those are the actions you have taken to date. You have not taken that action that's going to happen in May. So those actions that you have taken are consistent with, you have the authority to pass public safety tax. That public safety tax, you have the authority to self-impose a non-supplanting clause. You had the authority to create the funds, which you had to do for the public safety tax, one for the sheriff and one for the other party. And you have the authority in the future to add general fund money to each of those accounts. That's what you've done, and all that's consistent with accounting principles, the law, and everything else. There's a lot of discussion, or there's future actions that you will be taking in terms of appropriating money for these funds, or there'll be future actions and how these funds will be used. Those particular questions, I don't know what those questions are. I don't know what actions the board will be taking. So that's why this is as far as I go today, is to simply help everyone understand what you have done and what actions may be coming, and what actions you may be taking in the First Amendment.
Okay, so to me, it sounds like this is just kind of background for the discussion we'll have on the 12th. And I'd like to just defer that when we've got all of our stakeholders here and we can have the discussion. And Elizabeth, will you be present for that?
If you would like me to be, but I will not be providing any speculative legal advice.
I do think it's worth council hearing the discussion, though.
Well, yeah, for
Even
sure.
though she's not gonna.
You have included her in that invitation.
Okay.
And I think we can, at least one question's been raised that I don't think has to be speculative. It could be very, I think we know one of the questions that's going to be raised, so any insight you can.
What's the question? I don't know.
The setup that if we took the action that was proposed in May under the First Amendment of the Budget Proviso 18, is that consistent with the law regarding supplanting? Right? That's one question that I've heard. And then I've heard questions of can we do it and should we do it? And I think the should we do it's just for the stakeholders to talk about. The can we do it is where we'd need to hear that from you.
If I may, Commissioner.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
The proposed proviso language is just simply depositing money into the taking general fund money and putting it into the dedicated public safety tax fund. That's all the proviso's doing.
Right. Which is legal.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a concern I had when I looked at the proviso, because my understanding of tax funds is that they're very restricting. You only use them for the purpose dedicated, defined by the statute or the ballot measure.
Right.
And I did review that with Brandon Weber and the auditor's office, and the actual putting general fund in that fund is consistent and legal.
Commissioner Klaus?
Legal.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify, I think you said this earlier, but just to make sure, the maintenance of effort level, we've had to set that as the amount that they received in 2023. Is that right? And that will just remain the same every year?
I don't know anything about the maintenance level. All I know is that there's a term used, and that an amount was decided upon, and that amount was going to go into the tax fund. There's no other description in any of the resolutions or the actions you've taken that speak to that.
Okay, so I think that what we determined when we had our work session on the budget was that it would be the amount that they received in 2023. Does anyone know if that is the accurate definition of maintenance of effort?
So the maintenance of effort needs to be set in the year in which the resolution was passed. That would be the year that we couldn't go below, because supplanting doesn't start, or the way to measure am I supplanting is, are you spending less of county funds than you did before this restriction was in place? And the answer's got to be no, I'm not spending less. Could the board spend more? Yes, they could if they so choose, but they can't spend less than the amount from before the resolution, and that would be 2023, because we're starting to collect the tax in 2024.
Okay, well, I would like, Elizabeth, if you could be present. We may not encounter any legal questions. It may be a simple policy discussion, but you never know. And it's good to have you there to hear what the discussion is in case we have something that needs following up on.
I'll be happy to be there.
What is the concern?
That's what we will hear
We
next
still don't know.
on the 12th from the other electeds. We've invited them.
I've been
to share their
sheriff's here, but
concerns.
I public defense director, who was part of your discussion, came to me with the group's concerns and asked that I put together a work session, which I have done, and the date's the 12th, so I think we can get into it then.
I want to say the 12th, I will be at a doctor's appointment, and I believe Commissioner Mejia will be wandering around Washington, D.C. So there will be two of us not here. Just,
I will be joining via Zoom.
okay.
Is that in the 10 to 12 work session
Yeah.
slot?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be making for sure an effort to join via Zoom.
I guess I'm just gonna say, with the topic like this, I don't know where it's gonna go. I think it's crucial that all the commissioners should be available to participate in it. And I don't know what a doctor's appointment means,
It means I'll be getting chemotherapy for like 5 hours Monday morning, so.
I mean, what's the rush here on, let's not rush into something that we all can't participate in this particular issue. I can tell there's interest.
Nothing's happening till May anyway, right?
Yeah, I can watch
so
it.
we could watch it on, this will
watch
be
it
a
later.
recorded activity, is that it? And,
Well, yeah, no, I just mean if we
Will
wanted,
absolutely be
if we
recorded.
wanted to delay
Yeah,
it
okay,
so
okay.
everybody
Yeah.
can be there.
good enough.
Is the sheriff, do you have concerns that you're able to, like, is this, like, feel like we're playing cards here and nobody's like,
Nobody's showing
the
their
cards on the table?
I feel like if we get into it now, this is a long discussion, and we've got like 4 other things on the agenda, so I don't think we can get into it this morning. I'm I'm anxious to do that as well, but we've set a time for that where we'll have enough time to do it. We're not gonna have time to do it.
Can I say one thing? I know we're gonna move on, but if it is even perceived by the public that we're trying to circumvent the intent of this resolution to put this issue on the ballot, when I talk about trust, that is going to be about the worst thing we could even talk about. Well, let's try to figure out a way around so we can steal some of this money.
Absolutely. I have to completely object to what you're saying. There's a complete other argument and understanding, and we will get into that at the appropriate time.
Can't this be
Not
outlined?
what's going on.
Can't this be written out? I don't know who has the concerns, and can't they like spell it out for us so we can like study it, or
I'll talk to you about it.
Okay.
To me, yeah.
Okay.
Because I've gone through it with and I can. Thank you,
Like I
thank you,
said,
Sheriff, for being here.
This came up on the commissioner's agenda, and I was like, I'm gonna come sit and watch, because I'm already in the area.
We didn't know what we were gonna hear from Elizabeth, so.
Exactly. Other than that, I had no intention of coming and presenting or anything like that.
We'll make sure we fully vet all the issues on the 12th or.
We already have that scheduled, so.
Appreciate you. Okay, let's move to the next item.
Thank you.
And I'll fill in, Commissioner Fleming.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you, that's what I know. Next is item 4, FJC control system.
I am going to invite Jason to the table. So Jason and then Rick, thank you, Elizabeth. Rick is on the screen, Rick Thomas. And Jason is going to tell you about equipment failure at the FJC.
Good morning.
And you've got a little diagram in your packet this week. I handed this out. I don't know if that'll be handy or not.
I don't know. So, good morning. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the system. I know we've had discussions on the jail camera system and touchscreen and all that. Family and Juvenile Court has this system very similar to what the correction facility has. Last week, we experienced a major failure with it.
And what does the system do?
So the touchscreen, as you can see, it's a PLC program, kind of with the little cartoon diagram there. They can sit in
PLC?
Control.
Sorry, PLC.
Programmable Logic Controller is what that stands for. So they can sit in control, and they have a touchscreen system in front of them. When someone rings at a door, it pulls up that camera. The intercom's activated so they can speak to that individual. They can also unlock the door from that touchscreen system. It runs the detention facility, basically.
Is that it? That's just the detention facility?
Yes.
Okay.
We're talking about the juvenile facility at
detention
FJC.
facility. So,
So it controls cameras.
It controls
doors.
locks, intercoms, lighting, outlets. That's the 5 things it does control there. I'm not aware of anything else that it does control. So with the system being down, they are back to a keyed system. So if someone comes up to the door, they can no longer see who is at the exterior door or any of the doors. We've had to work with them to post signs. So now the individual has to call the control. Control will get someone to go out, speak to them, and either let them in or not let them in. There's major, I don't want to speak for the COs there, but I do know they have major safety concerns over it. I'll go into kind of the plan a little bit. The system is 25 years old. That facility was built in 1998. These systems usually last 7 to 9 years. We're well past that lifespan. I started looking back at previous resolutions and whatnot. It does appear that in the past, there's been some emergency repairs made to it around 2007, I believe that was. But we can't find parts for it. We are going to attempt one possible fix. There is a refurbished part that they have found. We're trying to purchase it. That part is around $6,000 for the part. And there'll be other costs associated with that, their labor and travel, because the only vendor around that does it is based out of Portland, Oregon. So they'll have to come up.
It's local, that's nice.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, they'll come up and stay the night because it'll be multiple days.
Hi, is that okay if I ask
Oh,
questions?
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I guess, one, I guess I'll ask, so if the refurbished part is kind of like a hopeful if it works, right? Like
Yes.
not just this is going to fix it, right?
It's a Hail Mary.
So if it works, great, how long is it going to last?
Not long.
Not long.
Okay, my second question is for an upgrade on this, how much is that?
That's what we're getting to.
Yes.
The,
So
the fix, the long-term fix,
a long-term fix is rough cost, because we just pulled this all together, is around $2 million.
Sorry.
yeah. So we've got
Tried
the
soup
project.
cans and string.
We need a lot of lipstick for this one.
Yes.
So, and we're basing that estimate because it just failed last week, right? Late last week. They've been trying to figure out a way to move forward with this. The refurbished part, if it works, is a stopgap. It's got to be replaced. And the estimate is based on the cost to replace the same system that hasn't actually failed, but is on the brink of failure at the jail. So it's the same stuff, and so it might not cost quite as much at the system as at the jail, because there's not as many doors, but it will be a similar cost, because the core system is the same that needs to be replaced. So we are asking the board to expand the scope, since we're already are we in design phase for the system at the jail?
Yeah, this is
Yes.
Rick Thomas with, Central Services.
We're already looking at replacing the one at the
The
jail.
one at the jail is in progress. I believe if we're not in design, we're well into pre-design.
We're well into design.
Well into design.
Yep, the jail design should be finished up in 2 or 3 months. And then, we have the possibility of going to construction shortly after that, pending funding.
Right, so we'd like to expand the scope of that project to include the FJC and just do both of them.
Sure.
But we've got to come up with the money.
I have a question, Chair. For the temporary fix, okay, we all hope that the Portland fix works, okay. Are we trying to come up with something now if it doesn't work, like in the next week, or when's that gonna?
So if it doesn't work, I have reached out to the vendors. They actually just got it back to me this morning. There is a possibility that they could do a stopgap to get us by until the whole system is replaced. This would basically just control up to 30 outputs, meaning they could control like 15 doors, 10 intercoms, and 5 locks or whatever.
How many are in custody over there right now? Are they like 10?
I believe it's around that, give or take. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
the
somewhere
exact-
in
It was
there.
like 2.
Huh?
I'd heard it was like
Well, there's
2.
been different times when it's been that low. I don't know that it
Is
is
this
now.
the internal doors as well? In custody stuff? Okay.
But if we were to, I'm just, I've mentioned this before, and I know not much about electronics, but I know my kids and grandkids and other people I know have a
Moscow.
ring system. And they're at work. They work all around the country sometimes. And they'll call and say, hey, something happened over at the house or something, and I run over there with my gun or something, and it's the UPS driver. No, but I'm just saying, there's some ways, can't we, and these things are like a couple $100 or
Yeah,
something.
you know the difference between buying something for residential and then buying something for the hospital or the school or the jail.
I know that, but if we're just talking about temporary, I mean, how much does
So
10
they
of those
can
ring
view
things cost? Or
They
something?
can currently view the cameras.
Okay.
They have to manipulate the screen to pull up what cameras they want to see. But there's no way to alert them like when someone is at a door or anything and pull
We'll
up.
have a ring thing mounted out there and they ring it. I mean, I've even got a cheap wireless doorbell.
Bing bong.
Yeah, that's right.
Right now, if someone wants in, they call the
doesn't
command
take that much.
control and they've got a workaround, but it's not efficient.
Well, I would
and-
like to know when we decide what we're gonna do here, how many are in custody? Okay, that's a big piece of this. If there's 2 in custody,
I've talked to Judge Skinder, he wants to chat before he'll schedule that meeting.
That was gonna be part of my commissioner's items, but I was gonna,
What's up?
okay, so on kind of that note that Robin just brought up was gonna be part of my commissioner's items, but, Grace Harbor, has reached out with their presiding judge and they are interested in starting again the conversation with us about, the juvenile jail, and they have asked for kind of the presiding judge for Superior Court, so we have, asked Commissioner Skinder if he would be willing to meet with them, and what Robin just said is that they would want to meet with us first before they continue that conversation.
As
So,
bad as our juvie is, theirs is way worse.
I had a question in terms of what fund would we have to pay this from?
Well, do
so-
we have an idea? Not yet.
No, so the temporary long-term fix, like I was talking about, the 30 door or 30 outputs is around 250,000, give or take. And that would not get us full operational. As far as funding sources, we've been bouncing around ideas. We currently have $102,000 in that building reserve, so we're nowhere near what is needed for the replacement of it. We had discussions Friday, we're still having internal ideas, trying to come up with this funding source.
So the funds that we would normally look at for this type of repair are the tension sales tax can be used for that building, but that fund, we've tapped it out. The REIT 1 could be used for this project, but we don't have any capacity in REIT 1. Building reserves, there's not sufficient money for this particular building, so finance staff are seeking funding that we could propose to you. That's the biggest hurdle of all right now.
How is using keys instead of buttons a safety concern?
I feel like you'd have to talk to the detention manager for that. I can't really speak to that. We're just maintaining the system and trying to keep it operational.
Clear, okay. I mean, I'm curious how keys are less safe than buttons.
Is there a cheaper fix?
Not that we can come up with.
that doesn't have all the bells and whistles, I mean,
Key, it's free. It's fixed.
in the old days, that's how we did everything, was with a key.
Yeah, historically, jails' doors could be opened with keys.
Every jail I've worked in, I used keys.
Which if that's the route the commissioners goes, we definitely can go that route.
I mean,
There's no $2 million sitting
there's
there,
no
so-
$2 million, that's the thing, and, yeah. If we have to go back to keys, then
Luckily, we have a very low juvenile jail population.
I'd like to go take a look. Matt?
We're turning over the rocks.
Let me know when you go take a look, maybe I can get on that schedule.
Yes, sir.
Anything else we need to, what's?
Shut up,
Nope, that's where we're at on this, was,
Informational
it's
updates.
informational today, we'll keep you updated, but we didn't want to, hold on to this news, and the long-term fix would be to add it to the scope of the current project.
And that's $2 million?
Right now, the rough estimate is 2 million.
What are we spending on the one that we're doing at the other jail?
I'm sorry, what?
What's the estimate on the one at the jail?
2 million. That's what we based it on.
So it's 4 million?
It would be 4 million. And the 2 million for the jail, we're taking out of building reserves? Yeah, we have enough building reserves at the jail.
And that's jail building reserves, not countywide.
That's
building
right,
reserves.
because the building reserves are building by building.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
awesome.
Next,
Thanks.
next up is in two executive
Yes, and thank you,
sessions.
Rick.
It is 11:39. The next one is, first one is pursuant to RCW 4231-10-1B to consider selection of a site or acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause likelihood of an increased price. That's a 10-minute item, and then we have a second one under 4231-10-1G to evaluate qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review performance of a public employee. First item relates to Sagewood HCP land acquisition, second related to county manager position, and that's a 20-minute item. Commissioners' action may follow one or both of the items. And so that's 30 minutes of executive session, which will bring us to 12:10. We're out of our executive sessions. I'm gonna turn it to the interim county manager.
Thank you. So your first executive session was regarding, the purchase of property to support the Habitat Conservation Plan. Is the board okay with putting that on for final action on your agenda this afternoon? Yes,
I
yes,
see
yes.
thumbs from all commissioners, including
Excellent.
Commissioner Klaus. Go ahead.
And then on the second item, are you comfortable with, moving forward, with additional reference checks and making a conditional offer?
Everybody says yes. Commissioner Klaus? Okay, yes, you have unanimous direction on that.
All right.
So this meeting is adjourned. We'll be back at 2 p.m. for our board meeting.
Thank you.